A recent University of Chicago social behavior experiment shows how these albino mice, although he has already learned to open the trapdoor, are not interested in freeing another mouse. When another albino mouse, who had shared the cage some time ago, was put in the trap, he released it immediately, demonstrating that he was able to judge the difference between unknown mice or mice that had been his companions. They then put a different colored mouse in the trap, and he was not interested in releasing it. Then they put the albino mouse to live only with non-albino mice. Later he helped free all the trapped mice regardless of color, and most importantly, he helped them without being interested in whether or not they were known to him. Their experience of living together had changed their prejudices. The Vedas stated that the social behavior of human beings is not very different from mice when using the lower intellect. Like the mouse, humans begin by experimenting with their environment and create the concept of good and evil, and he begins to classify events and objects to avoid pain and obtain satisfaction. The lower intellect can see and understand the ego. The ego begins by appropriating relatives, then friends, later toys, vehicles, and when leaving childhood, it allocates abstract values, such as nationality, flag, political parties, sports team, and finally, ideas and spiritual concepts. Over the lower intellect rides a higher intelligence called viveka, which in Sanskrit means correct intuitive discrimination, or power of discrimination between the real and the unreal. Ganesha is probably the best known today and signifies the supreme god of all the categories of knowledge that the lower intellect has created. Another older name is Vinayaka, which means remover of the obstacles that distort the decisions of the lower intellect. In the Vedas, these obstacles are disturbances and trends. The Vritis is called the way that responds to the undulations that affect our stability to see reality. Trends are inherited memories and are called vashanas or traces that deviate us from our path when trying to discern what we see. For example, the domestic cat, despite never having seen a viper, falls into inherited fears that overlap what the eyes are showing her. The cat thinks he sees a snake where there is only one cucumber. It is also common for the cat to confuse the human hand with a large viper and always try to bite the wrist, believing it is the viper's neck. The Vedas are a set of poetic verses that use standard terms of daily life. The Vedic Sanskrit hymns were converted to script. Due to the many meanings of specific terms, more than 1,500 grammatical rules were created. Thus, we find that Surya has two wives called day and night. Solar energy, the abstract and intangible term, is observed in the effects related to this energy, facts that we know as day and night. The translators interpreted the word related as engagement, and derived, as a sun. Then, a derivative of solar energy is Taipati, a daughter of Surya, which means heat, sunburn, and also tormenting oneself. Surya, as solar energy, is linked to the power of sight, visual perception, and knowledge, which probably most confuse translators. Saranyu is the feminine form of the adjective Saranyu, which means fast, floating, agile, and translations say that she is a goddess of the cloudy day and the dusk. How to know what the Vedas are saying? On the one hand, we think of the sun god. But if we look at other meanings, then the text probably does not speak of a wife but something related. That is, if Surya is knowledge, then cloudy refers to doubts to understand, and dusk is like a flare-up of doubts. On the other hand, the translation says that later the other wife, Chaya, shadows, arrived, and took the place of the first wife Saranyu, and replaced her. Ignorance replaces doubt. On the contrary, if we want to keep the direct translation of Surya like solar energy, its effects are those related to day and night, and a burn is the derived effect of solar energy. If we take the meaning of the Vedanta that affirms that Surya is knowledge, then the wives would be the doubt and ignorance and the son tormenting himself because of ignorance. The Vedas have hundreds of examples where the parents are the conscience. The wives are something related, and derived thoughts are called children. For example, in ancient times Daksha, one of the creators of humanity, son of Brahma, had 24 descendants, but his favorite was his youngest daughter Sati. True. Daksha had plans to marry Sati to powerful kings and thus increase his fortune through an alliance with other kingdoms. But Sati was in love with Shiva, who, far from having the imperial life of Daksha, Shiva led a modest life on a mountain, loved all living beings, and made no distinction between good and unfortunate souls. As in a soap opera more than 30 centuries old, Daksha criticizes the groom for his appearance, customs, and bad manners, asking his daughter not to marry Shiva. However, Sati tells her that she is in love, and defying her father she announced that she would marry Shiva, warning him that for her he was a god. Daksha organized a big fire ceremony and invited everyone except Shiva and his daughter Sati. The priest officiating the ceremony realized that not only was Sati and Shiva missing among the participants, but that Daksha had removed also ordered the Vedic verses naming Shiva. The priest then refused to continue the fire ceremony. Meanwhile, Sati had found out about the ceremony she prepared for her father and asked Shiva to go together. Shiva said that he did not receive an invitation, then he would not be able to go. Eventually, Shiva gave Sati permission to attend but refused to accompany her. Upon arrival, Sati tried to meet her parents and sisters. Daksha was arrogant and avoided interacting with Sati. He repeatedly rejected her in front of all the dignitaries, but Sati remained calm. Due to Sati's persistence in trying to meet him, King Daksha reacted vehemently, insulting her daughter in front of all the other guests, and began to criticize Shiva. Sati reminded him that her arrogant demeanor had blinded her intellect and cursed him, warning him that Shiva's anger was destroying him and his empire. Unable to bear further humiliation, Sati committed suicide by jumping into the sacrificial fire. Spectators tried to save her, but it was too late. They only recovered Sati's half-burned body. Daksha's pride and prejudice against Shiva created massive hatred within herself, which ultimately resulted in the death of her daughter. Shiva, deeply hurt upon knowing of his wife's death, ordered two beings from himself to decapitate Daksha, replace his head with that of a ram, and destroy the fire ceremony. Daksha asks the power Brahman, the Supreme Almighty, who has no form, for mercy, who faces the fire and forgives Daksha. The Parabrahman informs Daksha that Shiva is a manifestation of the whole. Daksha becomes a great devotee of Shiva. Let's look at another form of translation. Daksha, intelligence, wisdom, is a son of the creator Brahma. The derivatives of this wisdom called daughters, and in the translation are called respect, worship, steadiness, resignation, thriving, intelligence, action, devotion, intellect, modesty, body, expiation, perfection, fame, celebrity, truth, fitness, memory, affection, forgiveness, humility, without jealousy, energy, offering, oblation. If the 24 daughters are qualities derived from wisdom, then the story can be read differently. As soon as Daksha, the wise, begins to make plans to expand her greed kingdom using Sati, the truth leaves following the renunciation, Shiva. When greed arises in a master, truth goes in search of detachment. Finally, Daksha's pride and prejudice cause the truth to throw himself into the fire of transformation and abandon the sage forever. Shiva cuts off Daksha's head, all defects, provides him with a goat's head, leadership, and headless Daksha, free from arrogance and hatred, without bad qualities, apologizes to the Supreme Intelligence. This fact reveals to him that renunciation and Shiva are nothing other than wisdom itself, Brahman. Daksha, the sage, becomes devoted to detachment, renunciation, Shiva himself. Centuries later, Sati, the truth, returns and marries Shiva using dozens of different names. The best known, Parvati, daughter of the mountain, Gauri, golden, Uma, dark, Durga, invincible, and others. In this part of the Vedas, Parvati represents the love, beauty, and fertility of the supreme truth or divine energy and has two sons and then a daughter who asked in front of the wishing tree, Kalpataru. Truth sometimes feels lonely in this world. Shoka means grief, and Ashoka is the opposite, Sundari is beautiful. The name of this thought is, a beautiful girl who removes the trouble, or probably joy. The male children of the Shiva union are Kartikeya and Ganesha. Kartikeya is the eldest son, is a philosopher and warrior who teaches us the quest for ethical life and theology. He represents the way of thinking of the spiritual seeker. Ganesha, the younger brother, is a boy whose head was taken from his father and replaced by that of an elephant. If we consider that Shiva means the transformer, and we take root Shi, then it means that in the consciousness of the human being resides the supreme, the truth. So that transformation is about removing the veil that covers this truth. But if the root sarva is taken from the verb exterminate, we can say that Shiva exterminates ignorance. If our behavior is immature and careless like a child, Shiva, the transformer, will replace our mind with a powerful animal mind. An elephant is characterized by not deviating from the path and removes all the obstacles that obstruct its march. However, in this story, it shows us that it does not refer to physical strength but the power of the intellect. One day Shiva and Parvati announce to their children that they have received a fruit that contains the knowledge of all the laws of the universe. Since they only have one, they propose to carry out a race between the two brothers that consists of going around the world 3 times, and whoever completes them first will receive the fruit of wisdom. Kartikeya climbs into his vehicle, a peacock, and without wasting time, he leaves to complete the 3 chores of the world. Ganesha thinks that it has no chance in front of the peacock who can fly over difficulties because he rides on a mouse, the human body. But Ganesha is sure that there must be another way of seeing things. He knows that inequalities are sometimes illusions, and he begins by asking himself what the world is. Then, circling his parents 3 times, he declares himself the winner. Then he explains to his parents that what they are, what they represent, is their entire world. The parents gave their approval and gave him the supreme fruit. When Kartikeya returned and learned the story, human thoughts arose in him. He felt the envy, the jealousy, and the injustice of the gods when creating a single fruit. Since then, human beings have been lost in these thoughts and realized that the spiritual search is the only vehicle that leads to the knowledge of Ganesha, the superior intellect. The Vedas insistently present us with stories about the forms of ignorance that arise in the average life of any seeker. By recalling these stories, man can apply them to his behavior and identify his shortcomings. In Mahabharata, there is a war going on in the region called Kurukshetra, the field of men, which finally becomes Dharmakshatra, the field of right. The king of the Kurus, Dhritarashtra, he who sustains the nation, was born blind, and his wife Gandhari, bandaged, uses a bandage not to want to see what the king cannot see. This royal couple has 100 children among them, some of whose names mean the tough, the insensitive, the troublemaker, the one who does not listen, and a daughter, Dusala, whose name means discolored. Perhaps, the Vedas tell us that when man ruled by blindness and also voluntarily refuses to see, using the bandage of stubbornness, his thoughts become rude, insensitive, aggressive, and due to his self-esteem, he refuses to listen to others. Then, his life will be discolored. The most recent way to represent the existence of a supreme intelligence is the movie Vedanta Upanishad, The Life of Infinite Number. This movie shows how the higher consciousness begins to interfere with the beliefs of the lower mind put in metaphors. In this film, we saw frequent reactions that we all have to external situations, and how we argue with our fears and desires. The relationship between the boat, our body, the ocean of life, samsara, the sea of illusion, is an attempt to represent the tiger, our ego, under the golden light of knowledge. That as the Father warns him, the ego is not your friend. You have to master it so that it does not attack the intellect that suffers or enjoys the experience of the journey. Then, from the omniscient point of view, from the top, we saw the transformation of Pi, the infinite, as a universal view. And what does it become? Is it a wise man? Is it a god? First, he transforms into a man who reaches peace and who wakes up and leaves the island of hope, the human body. Then, he realizes that it is another illusion that feeds on those who believe in it. What we can understand from the Vedas is that their stories push us to look at the world differently. We will see a final example of what Advaita, the doctrine of understanding the essential, shows us. We know that the wind can blow out a candle. We also know that the wind can ignite the wood. So does the fire decrease or increase with the wind? The questions created by the mind is not always correct. The effect of the wind, as we see, is capable of lighting the fire more and also putting it out. The question is incorrect because the result depends on the quality and quantity of the fuel. Flames are directly related to what is transformed into fire. Thus, the quantity and quality of your faith are what make difficulties increase or decrease your spiritual progress.